case was Brown versus Board of Education, and the purpose of my speech is to inform you guys about the importance of this case and the impact it has had on everyone. It is important to learn about this case because it explains why schools stopped separating blacks and whites from schools. I am credible to be giving this speech because I have done thorough research on this case. But have you ever wondered why black and white people don't separate schools anymore? Like go to separate schools. Brown versus Board of Education was a popular Supreme Court case in 1954. People started racially segregating schools in 1896 under the court case of Plessy versus Ferguson. Plessy versus Ferguson was a court case of when they separated black schools and white schools and they couldn't go to school together. 1/3 of the U.S. was segregated. There were 17 southern schools and schools along the border, including the District of Columbia, had segregated schools by law. School segregation was first spread out into 5 different cases and then combined into one, which is Brown versus Board of Education of Topeka. Lawsuits were filed by Kansas, South Carolina, Virginia, Delaware, and the District of Columbia on schools that had legally segregated schools. Dozens of parents filed lawsuits, which would make them a plaintiff, which is a person who brings a case to the court. A resident of Topeka, Kansas, Oliver Brown, who was a welder and assistant pastor, is the name that appeared on the title of the case. There's a little story that kind of goes with the case, and there's a little girl named Sarah Roberts, and she was a 5-year-old black girl, and she had to walk by several white schools to get to her black school. And her father, Benjamin Roberts, filed a lawsuit against the city of Boston to have white and black schools combined, not separated. And the Massachusetts Supreme Court let the schools have control over it. And the Massachusetts Supreme Court and local schools thought it wasn't violating the black people's rights. And then this picture is from Google. The question was, does the segregation of public education based solely on race violate the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment? Or in simple terms, the court was being asked if schools should continue to separate white and black schools, or let them let white and black people be in the same school. And in the top picture right there, the first person is George E.C. Hayes, and he was a civil rights activist. And then the second person was Thurgood Marshall, and he was a civil rights lawyer. And the third person was James M. Abbott Jr., and he was the third person in the room, and he was an important civil rights attorney. And that picture is also from Google. The plaintiff's argument was that segregation was violating people's 14th Amendment, and that it wasn't part of the Equal Protection Clause. And the Equal Protection Clause was the idea that a governmental body may not deny people equal protection of its governing laws. The defendant's argument was that black people and white people should have separate schools, and the Board of Education basically just referred to Plessy versus Ferguson case. And this is a timeline of the case, and they argued the case on December 9th through the 11th in 1952, and then they re-argued the case almost a year later on December 7th through the 11th of 1953, and then finally they came to a decision on May 17th, 1954. They didn't really have a majority in dissenting opinion. It was unanimous. Is that how you spell the word unanimous? And they were hesitant to make a decision they couldn't enforce. They agreed that separate but equal was unequal and violated the 14th Amendment. Earl Warren based most of his decisions and opinions on the knowledge of social science studies rather than the court precedent. Then the 9 judges was Earl Warren, Hugo LaFay Black, Stanley Foreman Reed, Felix Frankfurter, William Warville Douglas, Robert Hewitt Jackson, Harold Hayes Burton, Tom C. Clark, and Shirley Milton. And then from the front row, left to right, is Felix Frankfurter, Hugo Black, Earl Warren, Stanley Reed, and William Douglas. And in the back row, it was Tom Clark, Robert Jackson, Harold H. Burton, and Shirley Milton. The impact of this case was that it legally ended segregation in schools and in the U.S. and affected 21 states. It also contributed to the Civil Rights Movement, and Brown versus Board of Education case motivated people to take action and made them realize it was unconstitutional. Today, the decision of who won is a complicated answer because over 200 school desegregation cases are still open on federal court dockets, but however, it did end most of school segregation. The purpose of my speech was to inform you guys about the importance of this case and the impact it has had on everyone. I hope you guys learned how they officially stopped having different schools for white people and black people and how it has impacted the state. But this was Brown versus Board of Education.